You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Meets Garu. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of I4MD 347H on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Silence dominated the room, nary even a single word uttered between detective and hero. Worry modeling his mien, Tsukachi remained silently seated next to All Might, his hands clasped together. He winced upon briefly glancing at All Might's casted arm for a brief moment. Most of the damage concentrated into All Might's right wing, of which twisted almost past the point of permanent monoplegia, along with the multitudes of lacerations bedecking its tendons. Whatever Garu did to All Might's arm, All Might was lucky that his arm could even recover despite the severity of the damage. I still cannot believe you've lost, and it isn't to your arch-nemesis. Tsukachi spoke his thoughts once more with an octave of disbelief. Toshinori Yagi sighed in his white bed. After Garu thoroughly handed his butt to him, the ambulance recovered his injured body and stationed him, as Toshinori Yagi, in a reserved private hospital room within Dagoba. Looking down on his right arm, seeing the bandages wrapped around the incisions inflicted by Garu's strange quirk, All Might ground his teeth with frustration. The image of Garu overwhelming him in combat was still fresh in his mind. Sitting beside All Might's bed, the detective pinched the bridge of his nose, worry and stress stockpiled within his heart and mind. All Might's defeat was the worst-case scenario, one that even Tsukachi never bothered to consider as a viable possibility. This is not good. If word of your loss spreads. Toshinori raised his working hand. I know. The hero community would crumble towards a downward spiral if the public knew. The hero hunter, barely after a week, already became Japan's #1 priority, an S-class villain that must be imprisoned within Tartarus at all costs. Tsukachi, how goes your indagation of Garu? Have you uncovered any relevant information pertaining his background? All Might asked, very curious about Garu's background. Unfortunately, no. In our investigation, we encountered a problem. Tsukachi pursed his lips. Garu has absolutely no background in Japan. The answer caused All Might to shoot his head towards his longtime friend. What? Tsukachi sighed as he rubbed the back of his head. We cross-examined his picture and his name, yet the others found absolutely no record of his BRTH, his social security number, nor anything close to uncovering his identity. In summary, Garu does not exist. All Might's jaw slacked in response, trying to parse Tsukachi's dilemma until he remembered his conversation with Garu before the battle. Wait, Toshinori recalled a key point of their chat. He said he came from somewhere far away. Maybe he's a foreigner. He cupped his chin with his uninjured left in deep thought. If Japan held no record of his BRTH, maybe his provenance originated overseas. You spoke with him? Tsukachi asked, his tone radiating with hope. Yes, when I was still Toshinori Yagi, we spoke. He was surprisingly civil and, well, amiable. He spoke of his need to find a quiet place to train, if I recall, Yagi recounted. Did he mention the reason? All Might shook his head in rejection. Unfortunately, Garu didn't explain his need for reclusive training. Tsukachi rubbed his chin in thought, trying to conjecture any locations that might serve the hero hunter's needs. I see. Considering the expansive land of Japan, there are many locations Garu could settle in. Diamenet, I fear for the civilians and others that live near his newfound territory. The detective grimaced, praying that the hero hunter won't drag civilians in his penchant for violence. After his intense engagement at Dagoba Beach, Garu set off to cleanse himself of BLD and grime using a fire hydrant of which he broke without any regard for property consequence. Once clean, Garu set off to retrieve his backpack left in the alleyway where he encountered All Might. Strong or not, he refused to attract attention by committing small-time theft, thus relying on the value of his essentials to financially sustain his livelihood. now fully packed. Garou cleansed himself even further by entering Dagoba's public bathhouse, needing to also clean himself of the sand left on his body while waiting for his clothes to dry. Once finished, he set off to Hasu once again, to the land where he first set foot into this world. Upon returning to the streets, however, he was immediately greeted by utter chaos. Villains seemed to run rampant here on the streets, several robberies taking place while heroes struggled to apprehend the runaways. The area changed too much in the following days. He did not expect this, nor did he longing such anarchy to occur after the end of his first hunt. A group of 3 villains, one with a head of a tongue, one with a nose for a chest, and the last having eyes aleatory dotted around his head, ran down the sidewalk with bags of cash, each sack dripping 10,000 yen bills in their escape from a duo of heroes chasing them. Another was driving down the road in a hijacked truck of which its driver was a man with tusks protruding out his eyes with looted goods stored in the back like jewelry as the police cars blared their sirens in their chase. There were even fights taking place between villains and heroes with the victors still undetermined, the sounds of battle reaching even Garou's distance. Well, Garou hoped the kid was unharmed in the uproar while he was away. While he did meet the kid a week ago, he liked the kid, mostly because the boy wasn't afraid of him despite seeing him slaughtering people he mistook for monsters. That, and he gave him food and money. While he was busy ruminating, a few of the villains, a group of people with no distinguishable traits, ran up to him before one of them pointed a gun, an M7 Glock, at the hero hunter's head, while the other 2 gazed at the heroes that pursued them. Ignoring the villains and the gun, upon looking at the 2 heroes, Garou noted their costumes share a similar theme with those he saw back home, yet they were different in the long run. A sun-themed skin-tight suit for one man and LTHR jacket on the other. As for the villains, the 3 shared a theme, all wearing a monochromatic clown mask bearing the predominant red as dark as the color of BLD, while garbed in a hybrid of a clown's attire and that of the ordinary mafias wearing the shoes of clowns and the suits of high-class gang members. Give up pursuit, heroes, unless you want to see this guy's brains blown up. The villain smirked, slowly circling Garou with a mocking grin of confidence, while the 2 costumed heroes grit their teeth at the unexpected hostage situation. However, neither were aware of the man's identity or the danger they placed themselves in, oblivious to Garou's shadowed eyes, nor his growing irritation to the situation around him. "Let him go, you villain. Wait, holy CRP, he looks scary," one of the 2 heroes uttered upon taking a closer look at the scarlet-haired man. "Ahahaha, words can't save you, wait. Wow, he is scary." The villain holding the pistol blinked thrice upon attempting to parse the palpably sharp irritation emanating from the man's countenance, one so tangibly keen it could punch holes in their hearts. The guy looked as if he was crossbred with a demon from hell, judging by the demonic right eye. Both heroes and villains descended into an awkward silence for a brief moment, unsure of their next course of action. On the one hand, they could continue their routine activities, but they couldn't. The man was just that DMN scary, and somehow emanated a dark presence that spelled death and misfortune if provoked. "You." The villain flinched upon receiving his hostage's piercing gaze. "I'll only say this once. Get that gun out of my face, or I'll paint the streets red and pink with your innards." "Eh?" all 3 villains and 2 heroes uttered in simultaneous confusion. The heroes shocked to hear such baleful threats from the hostage, while the villains were even more shocked that he didn't fear the gun aimed at his head. Despite being held hostage, the verisimilitude of Garou's threat carried far more authenticity than that of the man carrying the gun himself. A dark foreboding emanated from their hostage, an inexplicable feeling that cannot translate into words. However, it was a feeling that failed to correspond with the villains that were used to violence and abusing others. Thus, they quelled their unease to reclaim the vestiges of their dignity and confidence. "Shut up, hostage. Unless you want to die, I suggest you." Before he could even finish, his hostage rested his hand on his gun and crushed his weapon in a vice grip, reducing it to mangled scrap without a single warning, so casually it almost seemed surreal, especially when the man tore the defunctionalized weapon off of the villain's hand with no effort. The 2 heroes gawked at the scarlet-haired man in disbelief, slacked jaws almost hitting the floor. The man just crumbled the weapon as if it was paper and turned it into useless trash. "Come again?" the hostage asked. letting the mauled pistol fall to the concrete before tensing his fingers to the point of veins protruding from his skin. Ah! Today, another body pile appeared in Hasu, stacked by none other than the hero hunter himself. But this time, their villains included in the pile. Switching channel. The scene is just as brutal as his debut, but only for the villain side. I thought the hero hunter hunts only villains, yet. Switching. Look at their state. The hero hunter seemed especially cruel to these villains for some reason. On the screen, every citizen could see the mangled human pretzels that were the villains terrorizing Hasu, their states painful to the eyes and spirits of all ages, alongside the heroes as well, but especially the state of the villains. Izuku and his mother gawked at the screen, this time less horrified than the first time they've seen the hero hunter's debut. Izuku didn't expect to see villains added to the body pile, using the hero hunter's track record as his basis. Today was the first the hero hunter added villains in his crosshairs, though the state of the villains was perhaps more brutal than what he did to the heroes. Garu reduced many of the villains into literal human pretzels, limbs forcibly entangled together in a cruel pose designed to maximize their torment. In the hospital, the emaciated hero gaped at the screen, surprised to see Garu striking again so soon, although he was even more surprised at the sight of villains added to the pile. "What are you fighting for, Garu?" All Might mumbled to himself as he cupped his chin in musing. A man antagonistic to heroes just as much as villains. His violence almost seemed indiscriminate, but he could sense an invisible theme behind it, something All Might could not decipher behind the curtain of his actions. But one fact was certain, Garu was not a genuine villain. Upon further rumination, Toshinori realized that Garu had never killed any of the heroes he hunted, unlike a sure hero killer roaming loose in Japan. Not only that, Garu possessed one aspect almost all villains lack: honor. It was the first time in his entire life to encounter someone he was determined to arrest who actually spared him, and that same man stacked another bloody body pile of villains mixed in with the heroes. Still, All Might can't help but wonder if Garu habitually enjoyed piling the bodies of his victims in such a grandiose fashion. In another home, Tenya Ida and his family, all of whom sat at their family living rooms staring at their plasma screen television, paled at the sight of another body pile behind the screen in Hasu. Ida especially dreaded the return of the hero hunter. His worry for his big brother, Tensei Ida, began to stockpile. "One of the villains is waking up. Look, he's crawling out of the pile." The female news reporter with brown bob hair shouted, aiming her microphone at the villain, the one with a crimson clown mask, as the villain painfully undid the pretzel hold Garu forced upon his being. The sharp sounds of cracking bone reached the reporter's ears as well as the audio receptors of the camera, allowing the rest of Japan to know the agony of the villain. The listeners can almost feel his suffering, wincing at the sound with great sympathy. "Yeah, auug, my arms, gee." The villain wailed in misery as his bones agonizingly cracked back into position, and then attempted to crawl away from the body pile. Tears could be seen streaming down past the outer rims of his mask in his attempts to flee from a phantom horror, an unseeable terror embossed into his psyche. "Oh God, this is even worse than the last time." The reporter reported slightly unprofessionally, the memory of the first hero crying out for mercy from a body pile still fresh in her mind. The viewers could testament her claims as well, sympathizing with her feelings. Although this time it was a villain instead of a hero crawling and wailing, no one cared for the villains in the end, however. "Help me, somebody help." Another crawled away from the pile, wearing the same BLD red mask as the first. "My legs, I can't feel my legs." A third followed suit as the first two, only this one's legs bent in the wrong angle, in a direction opposite that of the usual. The reporter and cameraman simultaneously grimaced at the brutal sight. From what we've seen so far, the hero hunter showed even less mercy with the villains than with the heroes. His updated spectrum of targets has shown a new light of perspective on the mysterious man. Which begs the question, is his hate for villains greater than that for the heroes? Only time will tell until then. Seriously, now he's adding villains to the pile? In the home of Katsuki Bakugou, the self-proclaimed future #1 hero ruggedly sat cross-legged on the couch, watching the news with a sense of intrigue and belittlement. "You hunt heroes, but now you also hunt villains. What's the logic behind this, huh?" he scoffed but grinned from entertaining a thought. If he managed to defeat this Garu, assuming that All Might wouldn't, the authenticity of his destiny to become the #1 hero will solidify and ensure his road to success. He grinned at his delusional vision, the sight of him rising to the #1 spot and receiving the praise and fame he deserved. In another abode, one of traditional Japanese architecture, Japan's #2 hero, Endeavor, watched with a vicious smile stretching his lips, flames bursting from his brows and mustache upon seeing the pile of bodies appear in Hasu. A challenge presented itself before him, one that could bring him glory if he succeeded in this endeavor, an endeavor that could bring him closer to reaching the #1 hero's level. Watching from the open doorway, his son, Todoroki Shoudo, attended with a mix of interest and spite, the first at the mention of another body pile appearing in Hasu again, while the later was directed towards his abusive father abhorring his obsessive nature. While despising him, Todoroki can't help but worry for the future. With someone like the hero hunter capable of defeating so many heroes on his own set free upon Japan, he wondered if he could handle this villain with his quirk. He asked himself what he should do if Garou ever set his sights on Endeavor, and then him next. He cannot imagine himself capable of fighting someone of the hero hunter's caliber just yet until he acquired the full scope of his abilities. Among the villains, however, Garou's actions drastically altered Evil's collective viewpoint on his alignment. Every one of them believed Garou to be a villain, someone fighting for their side. They were wrong, however, now comparing him to a certain hero killer that despised villains as much as heroes but more defined in his occupation. Unlike Stain, something about Garou sets him apart from the other villains that came before him. His case was the first of its kind. He openly hunted groups of heroes without a second thought on the consequences. The way he took down his prey en masse and piled monuments of his victory with the bodies of his victims as his brick painted his image to that of a hunter's from the way he constructed trophies of his prey. Amongst the villains was a hunter amongst villains, a title that the villains gave to the first outcast that can stand against the oppression of modern society unchallenged. Exploring Hasu on foot again, a map spread wide in his hand, Garou continued walking through the streets undeterred, the roads evacuated by the heroes during his education of the villains. He did not plan to hunt the heroes that were present, but they, for some reason, decided to interfere as if they could stop him. They now joined the body pile as their penance. In the end, caked in trash and filth, Garou collected to add salt to their wounded pride along with their actual wounds. He didn't care if some of the filth landed on the villains' injuries or if it infected them in the end. That was how worthless the villains were in his eyes. In any case, looking up from his map, Garou saw a playground accompanied by a nearby school building, a swing set, a polychromatic mini-slide palace, horizontal ladder, etc. Garou mused at the sight of the playground. This one bore more equipment than that of which he and Tatsuru usually meet back in his world. Garou typically talked with the kid and sometimes gathered information on the heroes from his hero glossary. Thinking about the boy, Garou wondered how he was doing back there. He hoped he was doing well without him. As his eyes perused the playground as the evening sun slowly hiding under the blanket of the horizon, orange land slowly losing its light, Garou caught sight of a familiar face, one he didn't expect to see again ever since he left that person's home, especially at such late hours. The shrimp called Gin was sitting on one of the swings, looking down sullen and sad. The silver-haired boy surrounded himself with gloom, a sadness that matched the theme of the waning sun. Curious to know Gen's being here, Garou walked over to him across the unembossed stone floor, seating himself on the empty swing set beside him. Yo. Hearing a sudden, familiar voice, the boy perked his head up and turned towards the source, and widened his eyes upon seeing a familiar face. GG Garou, Gin almost shouted, jumping from his seat only to fall on his buttocks in his frantic scurrying away. Saw me on the news? Garou joked, lightening the atmosphere with a slight chuckle, dimming the boy's caution as the kid picked himself up to his feet. Why, yeah, you're not going to hunt me, are you? Gin asked, his voice almost a whimper, evidently terrified of his presence. I don't hunt brats, just heroes and sometimes villains. Garou shrugged, watching the boy seating himself back on the swing slowly after grasping the dangling chains, his caution slowly bleeding away by the casual ambience. After all, Garou did save him from villains, despite his brutal capacity for violence. Oh, okay, why are you here again? The boy asked, sideways glancing Garou with confusion. Well, I'm looking for a quiet place to train. Got bored with the heroes here, so I decided to invest my time in something more challenging, Garou shrugged with nonchalance. Eh? Gin turned his head to the man sitting next to him. You got bored with the heroes? What do you mean? The boy almost sounded as if curious of Garou's acumen on the heroes he faced. They're so damn weak, I feel cheated, to be honest. I mean, all of the heroes I faced back home were quirkless. But here, it's ironic that those with superpowers are weaker than those without them. You know? Garou scoffed, almost as if airing his grievances to the boy. As for Gin, he looked at Garou with fascination. Childish curiosity started to swell within. His silver ahoj began to wag from side to side slowly. So, are you planning to face All Might? Gin asked, wondering if Garou would hunt even the number 1 hero as well. Already faced him. Eh? That was an answer he did not expect. Wait, if you faced All Might, then did you? If Garou spoke the truth, and he was here talking about it, then that would mean I wouldn't count his defeat as a win. I hunt heroes, not patients, Garou shook his head. Patience? Gin tilted his head. Turns out he was injured before I faced him. It looked serious, yet he still chose to fight with that handicap. I don't know whether he's fanatically dedicated or just virtuously stupid. No idea how severe his wound is, but if he kept this up, his wound would permanently depart him from heroism. Silence dominated the air, the boy dropping his jaw at the words spouted from the man's mouth, not sure whether to take heed or dismiss his words as truth or false boasts. So you beat All Might? Gin timidly asked, wanting verification on his victory. Yeah, I beat him. I only regretted not facing All Might at full strength though. He better heal or else I will retire him from heroism forever myself. Garou glowered at the empty air before him, still livid at All Might for handicapping himself. Huh? You beat All Might? Seriously? Him? Gin's jaw dropped, eyes wider than dinner plates as all color left his being from abject surprise. But he's the number 1 hero, the undefeatable champion of justice. Nothing's undefeatable. It just means his enemies are just too weak for him, Garou scoffed at the kid's biased views. But, wow. Color slowly returned to the boy, his complexion a healthy beige as stars started to fill his eyes. Are you sure you're quirkless? Gin asked. There's no such thing as quirks where I'm from, Shrimp. I thought I told you that already. Shrimp? Gin tilted his head at his new nickname for a moment. Okay, but how'd you beat him? Gin asked, his silver ahoj wagging faster and faster in sync with his growing excitement, like a child listening to an exciting bedtime story. I fought him in one-on-one, and I beat him. Gin's eyes widen with respect and wonder. So you're stronger than All Might now? Gin asked to elucidate. Tesk, a weakened All Might, yes. I want to fight him at full strength. Garou rolled his eyes, still bitter about the state of the number 1 hero. Oh, without any quirk? Gin asked. Yes, without a quirk. Garou sighed, not sure how many times he had to repeat himself for the boy to fully receive the message. The common sense of power equals quirks was too strong here. What did you do to All Might when you beat him? Did you add him to a body pile? Did you turn him into a human pretzel as you did with Crimson Riot? Gin asked, smiling even wider when he mentioned the state of Crimson Riot. I left him be. Huh? The boy blinked, picking his ear with his pinky to clean out the metaphorical earwax. Did you say you left him alone? I thought you enjoy sending people to hospitals, Gin accused based on Garou's infamous record, never bothering to finish any heroes he hunted and sent them to the hospitals instead. I'll pretend that I didn't hear that, but yes, I didn't send him to the hospital. Garou felt offended by the boy's claim. Why? A valid question, Gin asked. Isn't it obvious? I want to hunt heroes at their best, otherwise, hunting them is meaningless. Oh. Gin's respect for Garou escalated even higher upon discovering Garou's code of honor. Now that I think about it, know any quiet places I can settle in, Shrimp? Garou asked, returning to his original objective. You, The boy paused, eyes veered heavenward in contemplation. There are many quiet places in Hasu. My neighborhood is amongst the quietest in a sense. Ha ha ha, Gin chuckled. Oh, know a place I can stay then? If there were a place that Garou would mark his territory, here could be ideal, a pleasant, quiet land free from distractions. Well, do you have a preference? Gin asked with childish curiosity. Don't know, but somewhere far away and quiet could do. Away from prying eyes. Well, my auntie owns the apartment building, and it is quiet, though there are no tenants due to the threat of villain attacks there. Gin hung his head dejectedly. Oh, Garou almost forgot about the villains that tried to abduct him. Remind me again, why were there villains trying to abduct you when I arrived? Garou asked, curious to the sequence of events that lead up to him accidentally murdering a bunch of inhuman villains. My auntie's a lawyer, a good one. She is a diligent warrior of the law, or so she says. She's now taking care of me. And being a lawyer is credence enough to abduct you? Garou could not parse the logic behind it. Well, right now she is trying to uncover the corruption in the hero system, trying to sue the guys responsible for assigning heroes to specific locations and stuff. She is charging them with bribery and murder. Well, she didn't consider that the opposition might play dirty, it seems. Gin gave a sarcastic chuckle at the end. Oh, Garou now understood the reason behind his abduction. Still, how many times did villains try to abduct you? Garou wondered how much trouble even a young kid could endure from villains and criminal scum. 3 times. The first time I was rescued by a hero. The second, I managed to run away. The third, you. Tears started to stream from his eyes. The boy rubbed them to dry him of said tears, not wanting to break down into sobs. DMN. Even Garou felt sympathy for the kid. His childhood was harsher than he expected. Does your aunt know about this? If she didn't, Garou would personally pay the lawyer a brutal visit for extreme negligence. Yes. She apologized many times after you left, but she cannot come back home. Being a lawyer is very tough, always having to stay at work most of the time. The boy sounded as if he was losing faith in society as a whole. Huh. Garou had no words to say. You said your place has no tenants? Garou asked, an idea forming in his head. Though it might be a bit shameless in the end, he admitted, but he needed a guide, a native to assist and advise him on the geography and history of this world. Someone to help his way through the new earth he stumbled in. Yeah, they are afraid that the villain attacks might involve them, even though the rent is cheap, Gin nodded, still sullen. Ha! You sound like you could use a bodyguard or something. Garou joked, brightening up the atmosphere with a chuckle. Yeah, Gin chuckled as well, swept along with Garou's sense of humor. A warm silence dawned over them like a shroud, the two enjoying the peaceful ambience of the quietness. Well, I'm not sure if I can hire you as a bodyguard though. I mean, you're the hero hunter. The guy who piles bodies for fun. Gin joked back as well, slowly bonding with the man that loved to hunt heroes and put them in body piles. Ha, and this hero hunter can pile bodies of villains just as good. Garou joked back. The boy's frown reversed to a smile, his sullen mood uplifting with the corner of his lips. Will you really help me? The boy turned to the left, looking at Garou with eager, hopeful eyes. Give me a place to stay, and I might consider it. Auntie is away, Garou-san. She won't be home for a month or two. The nervous, shy boy said as he leads Garou into his home once again. His room was less blemishing compared to before, wallpapers unpeeled and intact, furniture upright and proper, the broken microwave replaced, a working fridge, and more. Huh. All in all, Garou absorbed the true glory of the boy's home, unsullied by the dirt and touch of raiders. He nodded in approval to the large, simple room. Got a room for me? All he needed was a bed and some space, along with a wardrobe for a potential change of clothes as well. Well, no. I mean, I cannot clear a room for you or Auntie will find out. Gin shook his head. The boy did not want to risk his exposure to the higher authorities, especially his aunt. Good point, Garou noted the boy's loyalty. Looking around, Garou noticed a room, a door with the poster of All Might pinned onto the mahogany door. The door was open, the interior revealed, a sanctuary full of hero action figures atop a desk near a white, unruffled bed. However, every one of them collected dust, a sign of long disuse. You a hero fan? Garou did not mind. He could put his knowledge on heroes to good use in the end. The boy blushed in response, shyly looking away. Well, kind of. Garou did not press further on his preferences. He looked at the other rooms, leaning his head forward for a better view, either seeing them empty or filled to the brim, one of which he assumed belonged to the boy's supposed auntie. Where do you sleep if not your room? Eh? How'd you know? Gin asked, confused and surprised to hear Garou's question. Your bed's too neat. Perfect even. His bed was nearly untouched, too immaculate, like a bed from a hotel room waiting to receive arriving guests. Turning away from his new bodyguard, Gin shuffled his feet with some shame. I usually sleep on the roof. His unexpected answer threw Garou off slightly. The roof? Of all the answers, that wasn't one of Garou's predictions. I like to sleep under the starry skies, Gin nodded timidly. Now that caught Garou's attention. Really? Why sleep out in the unprotected air? Garou could understand the appeal of sleeping outside of nature sometimes, but this seemed more than just mere adoration for the natural world. My papa was an astrologist. He usually took mama and me out for camping once every month to stargaze out in the national park. His voice started to break for a second before recapturing its composure, but Garou did not miss the disruption of tone. What happened to them? Garou asked as the word did not correspond to his liking. The boy looked down, his eyes started to tremble. The hunter did not need a concise answer. Now he understood why he lived with his aunt and not his parents. You don't have to say it. Another silent pause. The boy nodded in understanding. Do you want takeout for dinner? Gin asked, wiping the tears from his eyes before forcing a cheery smile past his cheeks. How much can you afford? Gin blinked upon hearing his odd question. Auntie left me a hefty allowance, so. As much as you can. For 3 people at least. Gin blinked upon the interrupting demand. Seriously? Garou did not look like as if he was joking. Chinese, seafood, or American? All of them. Huh? His hunger defied the boy's expectations. Are you human? No average human could consume such amounts unless they had a quirk. Garou responded with a HMPH. Yeah. Why? Never mind. I'll make the call. Gin shook his mind clear of the stockpiling questions boiling within and walked towards the phone. Questions he will air out for another day. After the villain-hero pile incident, various controversies erupted around Japan on his alignment. While it was true that villains antagonistic to other villains existed, when placing Hero Hunter as the topic of conversation, verbal debates furiously rippled throughout every corner of Japan, from the mouths of heroes, civilians, and even villains. Most of the heroes debated how they should avoid the Hero Hunter or apprehend the polarizing villain, with more heroes on the side to elude the hero-hunting demon. Little did Garou know, he already became the symbol of fear for the modern heroes despite his current level. There were even a few heroes that considered retiring from the hero profession entirely just to avoid the hero hunter. However, compared to the heroes, the response was more polarizing from the villains. One group admired the violence and brutality of Garou, some even attempting to recreate the body piles Garou left in his wake at this time. Another group held nothing but disdain, feeling betrayed by Garou's including villains in his crosshairs. Their expectations shot down the moment he added fellow outcasts into his spectrum of prey. Some of them considered hunting the hero hunter down to avenge their fallen compatriots despite the risks. As for the civilians, the parents of their respective children were torn between sending their children to hero school and forbidding them from attending. Garou's hunts impacted parents the most, planting fear into their hearts with pictorial possibilities of their children joining the pile of bodies along with the heroes. But despite the grievances of the parents, the next generation still wished to follow through with their becoming the heroes of their respective dreams. One of the next generations was currently engaging with their parents concerning her future. Uraraka turned to her parents, her dimpled features huffed as she stood before them, staunch in her decision. Mama, Papa, you two can't change my mind anymore. I'm still going to UA. The young girl defended her dream, despite the threat of Garou looming overhead, blanketing the future of heroes with unimagined perils. The father and mother gently smiled, masking their worry behind the benign veneer. Ochako, are you sure about this? the mother asked, wanting confirmation in her choice of a career in spite of the dangers it carried. "We are worried for you, Ochako. Mama and Papa don't want you to risk your life for us. We are doing fine as it is," the father relayed. However, despite their attempts, their daughter responded with wide eyes burning with determination. She was still devoted to walking the dangerous road, even though it was no longer the same, safe road for young minds to reach their dreams. "I'll be fine, please wish me good luck." Ochako smiled, flashing her pearly whites. Her heartwarming smile melted the hearts of her parents, along with their resistance. Arguments between parents and child also happened to others around Japan. A particular rich girl with the ability to create anything from her body fat was fiercely debating with her parents on her enrollment to UA. A particular living bomb engaged in verbal combat with his mother, adamantly staunch in his career choice. Even a certain concerned mother tried her best to convince her formerly quirkless son to abstain, not wanting her child to appear in a body pile, broken in mind, body, and soul. If their fears remain unassuaged, it will consume the hero system like the cold of night preying on a dying campfire. Fear is contagious, one of the most influential driving forces of life, and worse, it takes no sides, be it good or evil. The ones living on the other side of the coin reacted differently. An acting coward dares to mock my crusade? Holding the latest newspaper, looking at the hero hunter section with disdain, the crimson-themed killer of heroes growled in rasps, teeth trembling and eyes wildly twitching with infuriated mania. The hero killer, Stain, started and trended the hunt of heroes long before this pitiful excuse of a hunter even started. And yet this newcomer took over the attention of Japan by a storm, sweeping his existence aside like trash. Worse, the hero killer discerned a fact hidden behind the maelstrom savagery. Garu had not taken a single life with his hands despite being capable of defeating so many. Stain thought he finally found a sympathizer and would be more than elated to invite him to his cause if it weren't for this inkling. From this alone, he could draw only one conclusion. Garu had no longing to cleanse the world of weak heroes, just to break down the worth and value of heroism entirely without any regard for the consequences. As for a certain arch-nemesis of the symbol of peace, he smiled at the progress of this individual, while his faceless gaze focused on the television screen. Listening to the reporter, All for One pondered on this one's potential, considering what he should do if he managed to turn this successful hunter into his fold. While he took in an heir to pass his quirk onto, the purpose behind his chose was to fashion an infectious knife to carve and infect All Might's image and spirit. However, he would prefer someone more capable should Tamura indeed fail to live up to his expectations. While it is in human nature to bestow one's strength to the next generation, it is also in a human's nature to replace what one has for something better, something more ideal. All for One was reconsidering his choice of successor behind the descendant of the previous wielder of One for All. Another fact that the ageless villain discovered was that this one shares Tamura's age. He can discern Garu's age from his experience, his years of observation of newer generations of villains making their debut, the accumulated knowledge and data more than enough to conjecture Garu's age. Although Garu's personality still eluded him, his character and behavior quite a unique specimen, an anomaly that required further study. As for the heir of All for One, his eyes glared at the wall of snipped newspapers, all sections about the feats of the hero hunter and the impact they brought to the hero community. He scowled at the articles, feeling threatened by Garu's growing infamy. Next to the snippets was a corrupted image of Garu, BLD warping the hunter's image and red filtering the view. A demonic portrayal of Garu in its most potent, a shadowed demon from hell naturally complementing the red environ. Tamura slammed his palm on the red poster, 4 of his 5 fingers pressed on the paper, the remaining appendage threatening to make contact. He was livid, furious at the hero hunter. This nameless upstart managed to steal a head start, a lead in the race to become the next kingpin of the underworld. On the one hand, the urge to hunt down this Garu and decay his body to ash was enticing, something he would more than gladly oblige. On the other, the villains will lose a valuable asset, a card against the symbol of peace. Tamura gritted his teeth, wanting to murder this Garu with his own hands, but considered otherwise. His lips curled into a grin, entertaining a thought. The secret weapon his sensei was funding. What would happen if he pits this flawless anti-All Might and Garu against All Might? witnessing All Might's unsightly demise supersede his longing to maim this symbol of fear. After all, the road to becoming an icon of fear was not his longing, only the apex of evil will catch his eye. Fu. Atop the roof, exhaling a deep breath with the sun soaring behind him with turtle-like grace and painting his world in the orange of dawn, Garou immersed himself in his mental world, meditating half-naked with only the skin of his baggy pants with intense focus. Seated cross-legged, the hero hunter drifted away from the material world to submerge into the darkest corners of his mind, emptying himself of distractions in his training. Within his inner world, he visualized the two apex grandmasters that defeated him before his arrival, simulating phantom combat between him and them. He envisioned all possible methods of victory over the two geezers. His sole goal is to surpass them and achieve the perfect form he desired ever since small. However, he cannot defeat them, simulated or real. No matter the number of his attempts, he could only see his disgraceful defeat in 2-on-1. But the further down his efforts, the more he overwhelmed them in his simulacrum. He was growing in power the more he fights, stronger when nearer with death. Not only did each imaginary battle further push him further to his potential, but also past the ubiquitous limit to the great power that lies on the other side. Done with visual training, for now, Garou opened his eyes, gazing at the shadow elongated by the sun behind. "How long are you going to watch?" The person Garou was referring to flinched behind the door, slowly poking his head out the exit door frame, his silver ohoj wagging side by side like the tail of a puppy. The boy did not respond with words, but with curious eyes. Garou sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose. "What do you eat for breakfast, anyway?" Gin blinked as he pondered. "Usually eggs and rice or cereal and waffles. Sometimes ramen, sometimes rice with meat and veggies." Garou considered the choices. "I want some ramen along with some meat." Nodding, the boy ran back downstairs to his home floor, eager to prepare the dish for his bodyguard and guest. He ran out to the kitchen and started the stove, filled a pan in the sink, and placed it over the active burner, letting the flame warm and boil the cold liquid. The boy then proceeded to grab bags of ramen and retrieve the vegetables and meat from the fridge, readying the breakfast for the two of them. While the boy prepared the breakfast, Garou landed on the couch in the living room, grabbed a remote and turned on the plasma screen TV. What brand the television belonged to, Garou did not know, but considering the screen's high-def quality, it must be very costly. The first channel, the cooking show, greeted him. Garou immediately switched channels regardless. A cartoon show about All Might fighting villains blinked into the screen. Angry, Garou changed the channel again and again. However, most of the channels only slowly bled out his boredom and replaced it with frustration instead. The channels that greeted him were either mostly about interviews of heroes, communities promoting the fame of heroes, or shows below Garou's tolerance. Upon landing on a news channel, Garou smirked with interest as he witnessed the current state of heroes in the hospital along with the gruesome fate of villains he maimed yesterday. The sight of broken bodies, for some reason, soothed his soul as he smiled wider upon watching their reaction to the interviewer's question on him, the one who personally sent them to those resting beds himself. Most of them spoke with fear, others apprehension, a few unable to respond at all from abject terror. Garou chuckled at their reaction, and then he watched how the fanbase reacted to their hero's current state. A statistical analyst compiled the data from last week, speaking of a significant 10% drop in sales of hero merchandise after the first body pile. Garou reveled the diagrammed decrease of faithful hero supporters, of how mortified some fans were even to witness their idol's pitiful state. However, there was a surprising lack of All Might within the news channel. Word of his defeat wasn't present within any topics so far. Throwing his back on cushions back him, Garou grimaced at the absence of anything All Might related. Did they conceal his defeat? Garou speculated that the loss of their so-called number one patient would carve out another severe wound from society's gestalt vision of heroes, though as for the magnitude Garou did not mull over. Now that Garou thought about it, what would happen if the world learned of his victory over the muscled hero? Garou imagined chaos and anarchy deluging the streets, quirk users rampaging and attacking civilians, many robberies taking place, victims piling by the storm, and more using his encounter with Scum and Hasu as his reference. "It better not be too noisy," Garou uttered with displeasure. The world better not descend into too much chaos before Garou achieved his end goal. Garou-san, breakfast's ready. A gurgling rumble responded in the living room, a sound that did not reach the boy's ears. Sweet. Closing the TV, Garou hopped off his seat and casually strolled into the kitchen. A large, hot steaming bowl of noodles standing atop the tablecloth greeted him, the scent actually tantalizing to his nose. Accompanying the main dish, bowls of beef and chicken, as well as plates of vegetables, surrounded it, forming a simple but fulfilling meal for a stomach of his size. Moving to his seat with his smaller bowl of soup noodles, Gin started to dig, pulling several slivers of ramen to his mouth before he slurped them down his throat. Not hearing the usual itadakamasu, Garou threw one of his chopsticks at the boy, the wooden stick bouncing off his strong head before coming back to his hand. Pay your respects before eating, Garou lectured, the boy rubbing his head with a whimper before nodding in forced compliance. Seeing him say itadakamasu, Garou then paid his respects with his itadakamasu, and proceeded to slurp grouping strands into his mouth as Gin watched and mimicked his actions timidly, stuffing his cheeks full. He spoke with his mouth full. Are you planning to hunt more heroes today? Maybe. I want to explore the land, though. Garou replied with his mouth also full. Got any interesting places? Garou asked before gulping. VOICEOVER was one of the administrators behind the hero community, a manager of the department's strategic and target-oriented patrol plan. He was responsible for assigning both heroes and police to specific locations, schedule patrol routes for the less popular and effective heroes along with police officers, and accountable for cataloging the crime rates in each section of Japan. His face belonged to that of a kind man, the one that would feed the birds every day with a warm smile and eyes closed. His figure was stout, but his belly bulged the white undercloth beneath his suit, indicating slight levels of obesity. His hair was absent from his balding dome, old age already bedecking white strands into his black eyebrows and beard, and wrinkles sloughing his smooth face pulled down by hands of decay. However, behind his facade was a rotten, vile thing, something that belonged to somewhere trash belonged to, where others must throw him to erase from their memories. Something even most villains would smite if given a chance if they knew of his true nature. He was one of the Union's loyal seed, a manipulator of strings to secure trading routes and silence curious eyes to ensure the security of the dark side, one of the critical figures allowing the transport of illegal goods like villain costumes and even the materials needed to sustain a certain all-for-one. How else could villains obtain products under the nose of heroes if not from someone on the inside aiding them? For years, he leaked information to the leading villain organizations, which heroes assign to which route, allocating schedules and create gaps in their patrols so smugglers can slip past them undetected, and even committed blackmail and ordered assassinations to ensure tight lips on his job. Not only that, he had a terrible reputation of forcing himself upon the opposite sex, the stronger-minded the more he desired to break. He was sadistically fond of abusing and violating the innocent. Even once had his way with a tender soul, not even reaching the age of 6, before he erased the memory of his victims with his quirk. His quirk, Mind Wipe, allowed him to erase the memories of others by at most a few days, the number of usages being twice a day. However, he cannot use the quirk on the same target twice. Thus he could not reuse his victims lest he dug his own grave in his ignorance. However, evidence of his misdeeds slowly leaked drip by drip, the droplets forming a puddle in the soil and dangerously close to filling the pond. The leak took the form of an irksome investigator that somehow obtained some evidence of his misdeeds, an accomplishment which leads to said person's assassination. But, to VOICEOVER's dismay, he left a trail that leads to his current situation, him enduring a severe case regarding his involvement of the assassination. The union he worked for only left him with a few options to salvage the situation, his standing placed in jeopardy within this debacle. If he cannot absolve his dilemma adequately, the union will silence him forever and leave no trace of his corpse. Thus, the sequence of events lead to his resorting to covert abduction and blackmail, but his attempts were undesirable. The first attempted ended with a hero managing to catch wind of the kidnapping. The second, using a nanny to babysit the boy, lead to him escaping the villain in disguise, the boy proving more cunning than he thought and managed to contact a hero to arrest the second kidnapper and the third. News of his mercenaries' deaths had recently reached his ears, A gory scene depicting a butcher from hell to mutilate the sinners limb by limb. Deaths so graphic not even the stoutest, most hardened hearts would remain unfazed at the savagery. The only witness there was the very boy they were sent to abduct, and his story was absurdly unrealistic. Speaking of a man falling from the sky covered in BLD and tearing his hired hand to pieces. Such a claim was beyond surreal, yet in the world of quirks, it corresponds to the realm of possibilities nonetheless. Still, for FUY's third attempt to fail by what anyone could accurately describe as an act of God, it only fueled his frustrations past the boiling point and near the melting one. As for his opponent, Tsukihana Shinjitsu held an annoying talent for the law, along with an equally bothersome quirk. Her tongue can help amplify the persuasive effects of her words, better sway the court into her favor. It cannot perform superhuman feats like convincing someone to commit suicide with just an utter. But if used with the right words, she can sway even the most obstinate soul to her side if her skill with the tongue was enough. However, it was not without weakness. Her quirk functions by amplifying the effects of her speech to those that listened, meaning her quirk will not work on anyone antagonistic to her or neutral. If one was aware of her quirk, the effects lessen with that knowledge alone. The key concept behind her quirk is refining the vision of authenticity, not forcing it upon the minds it touched. She cannot force its effects like with FUY's, giving her credence enough to work in her complicated profession. Not only that, despite her quirk, she had built a growing reputation in her line of work, earning the trust of her clients and the government itself, a crusader of sorts determined to purge all corruption and malevolence infecting modern society. A dangerous foe with promise, someone that can rise high in the justice world, but she was still young and vulnerable. She does have weaknesses, one of which was the nephew of her beloved older sister. The man now spoke with all for one via cell phone, untraceable, in his private room of desk and books shrouded in the shade. Yes, but, all right. In any case, I understand your position, though still, what? You have? FUY gritted his teeth in his chair. All right, I understand. He hung up, gritting his teeth in anger. After working strong for him and the union, after working my back off to bring that faceless freak the tools needed even to survive all this time, they think they can replace me? Me? FUY roared, throwing his phone at the wall, splitting into parts on contact. I'm the one keeping tabs on the heroes and their patrols. I'm the eyes and ears that warns the darkness of the light. And yet, they think their eyes and ears can be so easily replaced? FUY ranted his grievances, unable to tolerate his position. His imagination ran wild, corrupted by a mix of rage and depraved lust, a silver-haired young woman bound and helpless before his encroaching wrath. Drool started to slick from his lips' corners before suddenly returning inside with a slurp. The pig in human form submerged himself in his idle fantasies as he pondered on possible paths to overcoming and subjugating his foe. But no matter what, he still couldn't think of anything else. He cannot touch nor harm Tsukihana, unable to sabotage her agency due to heavy security of heroes and the plethora of witnesses, and he was on the defensive against her. Still, no matter what he conjured, he couldn't find a solution other than hostage. Wait, an idea had popped up. Desecrate her home and burn it down along with the boy. What if he could break her spirit instead with murdering a young child? He was surprised that he hadn't thought of it before. Maybe murdering children was his limit, a line no one should cross, but that no longer mattered. His life dangled on a thin, fragile thread, his only way up threatening to snap. No more room remained for mistakes, only success do or die, as they said. I wonder what hired hands Jiren has available for me. He must work fast. The woman was gaining more and more ground by the day. The last of the 3 potential locations laid outside the outskirts of Hasu, far, far away, a mountain of considerable size, surpassing the height of even the old fart's place. A monolithic pillar of dirt, sand, and stone chiseled by the hands of nature, the design loyal to the aesthetic of nature. If Garu had to estimate the approximate, it was somewhere around 20 to 30% taller in height, the superior imposing size tickling Garu's fancy. It was ideal. Far away from the distractions of civilization, the air very pristine, and a vast expanse of land, there was nothing more Garu requested. Nothing confined him here, shielded from nuisances that might come his way. He could only smile at the sight, despite the mountain bringing in somewhat unpleasant memories of his time in the old fart's dojo. Nonetheless, that dojo was the place where he learned how to fight, his beginning. Quite big, Garu praised, marveling the large outcrop of dirt and sandstone. Garu never knew a mountain like this could exist adjacent to a quiet town, though this strange world held a wondrous charm for subverting his expectations. Papa liked to hike outdoors. The higher places are the best to look at the stars. Ho! If he could, Garu wanted to meet this guy one day to thank him in person, though it might take a very long while before he could. He seems like an interesting man. Gin smiled, feeling warm by the hunter's compliment. He said it's like reaching the heavens whenever he climbed. He sometimes takes us with him to climb the big rocks. I miss him. Head hung low, Gin snuffed, tears threatening to leak past the eyelids. His sadness was apparent, as tangible as the solid earth underneath them. Reaching a hand, Garu gently patted his head and consoled. His actions worked to an extent, comforting the kid's spirit as his tears slowly dried. May I meet him one day? Garu asked. Wiping his tears with his sleeve, released, Gin nodded with a more cheerful grin. The heavy air cleared. Both hunter and boy looked at the mountain again as the awkward silence took hold once more. So, what now? The boy asked, his ahoge wagging in anticipation as he gazed up at his bodyguard. Simple. I'm gonna mark this as my territory. Garu smirked. His eyes remained glued to the mountain's peak, taking in the full view of beige mottled with nature's greenery nestling deep within the stone. The boy blinked at Garu's declaration. You want to claim this land? I'm, well, not even sure if this land is private property or if there is a deed of ownership, so... My land. The hunter glared down at the boy, staunch in taking ownership of this place, undocumented or not. Okay, his declaration stripped Gin of any further retort from his throat. Don't judge me, Garu demanded. Okay. Gin backed off, raising his hands in mock surrender. The quiet returned like a receding tide. The hunter and helper stood there, the first taking in the sight of the mountain and the latter staring at the strange creature that was his quirkless bodyguard. So, what now? You gonna start camping out here or something? Garu turned to Gin, a smile slowly growing. Still thinking on that, but I need some supplies. Do you still have your camping equipment from your younger years? Gin pursed his lips. The hero hunter's choice of words indirectly painted him as an old man. Of course I do, and don't make it sound as if I'm old. I'm still 9, Gin pouted, pumping both arms up in adorable protest. PFFF. Garu nearly spurted out laughing. What's so funny? The kid shouted. You're finally acting your age, shrimp. The boy blinked before pouting at Garu. What do you mean? This is probably the first time I've seen you ticked. Most of the time the boy would timidly obey or shyly inspect him from afar, afraid to engage in any conversation whatsoever as far as he knew. He never knew how amusing the kid could be when befriended. Eh? Of course, I can be ticked. I may be a quirkless boy, but I can and will stand up for myself. His cheeks pouted even more. Yeah. Amused, Garu turned back towards the mountain, a thought crossing his mind. He pondered the possibility of quirkless heroes and the potential of the heroes here. Say, are there any cases of quirkless heroes here? An odd question, the boy thought. What? No, wait, I think there's a quirkless vigilante, but no, you'll most likely obliterate him. Probably in one shot. Gin wondered, remembering there was a certain masked hero wielding brass knuckles as weapons before. As for Garu, he was not surprised, but the disappointment still lingered. The concept of a quirkless hero was almost alien here. Back home, the ones he hunted and ones that hunted him provided more challenge than any of the ilk here could ever accomplish. Even the B-class guy with the glasses proved more interesting than the heroes here, except Allmight of course as the sole exception. Shame? Garu could see more potential from those there than those here. They lack substance, a defining foundation. An awkward atmosphere settled, now with little to no topics to cover anymore. Garu's mind wandered to the next potential names of heroes to add his list. A guy that looked like he was spawned by a loser that decided to breed with a tree. Some guy with Gatling guns attached to his wrists. A woman that can become giant. A pyrocarbon copy of All Might. He then recalled one guy that can erase quirks with his gaze. Some promise, but considering his not so high standing in the hero rankings, the guy must be weak. Now that he thought about it, that guy was also a teacher at some overrated school for heroes. He forgot the name since he disdained the concept of a hero school because it inundated the dangers of heroism given how the garbage performed so far. "So, what is your school like?" Garou asked, now curious on the smaller parts of life, the normal aspects. Gin pursed his lips at the word school. "It sucks." Garou could relate to that feeling. "Bullied?" Garou guessed. Yeah, Gin sulked, his head downcast. "Is it because you're quirkless?" Gin sulked even further. "Yes." His voice was now a whisper. "Why don't you become strong then?" Garou suggested. To him, once obtaining strength, the vermin of life will not step in one's way, coming from his experience. I can't." Gin shook his head. "Why? There's no such thing as you can't do or don't, there's no middle ground," Garou disproved. "But," Gin looked up, tears shone from his eyes greeting Garou's own. "I'm not like you. I mean, I don't know where you're from, but I'm pretty sure I can't get whatever strength you have. I mean, I'm not special like you." Gin melancholically shook his head. Garou shrugged. "Did anyone at least try?" "Yes." "No, not that try, I mean, really try?" Garou asked. "Well, I don't know." The boy shrugged. The awkward atmosphere dissipated. A calm wind arrived afterward, carrying stray leaves and loose dust. Now that he asked, Garou wondered, was this world cursed with weakness since BRTH, or was it the presence of quirks hindered the human potential? "Do you want to find out?" Garou asked, wanting to put this matter to the test. Confusion sank into his ears, the words failing to reach his understanding. "Excuse me?" Garou smirked, turning the rest of his body around to face the boy. "I wasn't always strong, you know? When I was your age, I could barely hit 20 push-ups, and look at me now." Reaching out, he outstretched a hand to the kid. "Want to find out if the strength from my side cannot exist here yourself?" Garou asked encouragingly. Confused, the boy hesitantly tried to speak up, but, as if his courage died down, he clogged the words in his throat. His head was turning away, Gin's fingers clenched from uncertainty, eyes radiating his inner conflict. Garou did not miss the subtle signs, the twitch of muscle and posture. He waited to see the boy's answer, but it seemed he still held himself back. The burdensome common sense of being quirkless chained his motivation and courage. Irked by his lack of self-esteem, Garou narrowed his eyes very slightly before asking, "But what do you have to lose?" That question lit a spark within his heart. Gin looked up as if a revelation dawned on him upon reflecting that simple question. Without another word, he slowly, still hesitant but less than before, reached out and took his hand in return. "What should I do if—" "No ifs. Do or don't. There's no middle ground. It's either you get strong or forever stay weak. So, what do you choose?" The boy looked at Garou, taken back by his stentorian interjection. Do or do not. No ifs allowed. It was either take a risk or forever do nothing, forever suffering at the heels of... With eyes hardened with resolve, Gin nodded in affirmation. "I'll do it." Everything he ever knew and loved was taken away from him, by both hero and villain. Something he must repay no matter what, a story that no one would pay heed, at least no one yet. The boy's fist clenched with determination, seemingly ready to take on anything the hunter could throw. "It will be strong, you know? You might go home crying," Garou teasingly warned. There were three reasons why he decided to take the kid in and not Taro back home. 1. The shrimp needed it more because others threatened his life constantly with dangers that no kid his age should endure. 2. Garou wanted to see the potential this world had to offer. If this kid could meet, or better yet, defy his expectations, Garou would confirm that hope still existed in this world, that strong heroes could subsist with or without quirks, and further prove the folly of this world's hero society even more. And 3, he had to repay the kid somehow. He wanted to compensate him for the money he obtained, around 100,000 yen. He still couldn't get his head around the fact that the kid was somehow wealthy, though the funds most likely originated from his aunt. A topic to delve for another day, he supposed. "Bring it on. I can handle anything you can dish out," Gin declares with newfound cockiness, now excited to learn under probably the scariest man on earth without fear. Good. Climb that mountain, Garu declared, pointing his finger at the mountain peak. He failed to register those 3 simple words as his mind immediately rejected the imagery that came with them. What? Ocularly following the finger, Gin craned his neck as much as he could to see the end of the monumental giant. He failed though, his neck reaching the maximum angle it could achieve and not past 3/4 of the entire thing. You heard me. Gin could feel his legs aching from the imagining alone. He could picture himself gasping for respite so high up as the fear of death threatens to infect his courage should he ever look down. I don't think you said anything, and you climbed it before. If Gin's ear was working right, he swore he heard a mocking tease from Garu. And you could climb it. The dojo I grew up in is built atop a mountain just as big as this one. Now climb. Gin looked down at his hands and then the rough abrasive stone, imagining the latter ablating the first with little to no resistance. Yes, with your hands, Garu answered the phantom question. If a boy his age could pile more regrets than that of any other could exist, he was one of them. Already he felt like crying as phantom pain racked his entire body even further. His complexion paled even more also upon realizing that he signed up for a training course from hell, literal hell. Or are you chicken? Looking behind, Gin saw a smirk widening Garu's lips, a very mocking, provocative grin, one that Gin wanted to wipe from existence with fists and rage violently. He never knew that someone as violent as Garu could become so annoying. For the first time in a year, the boy felt irked as his veins threatened to pop, the urge to repay Garu overriding the infectious despair. Oh, it's on. The first disciple of Garu immediately took his first step up with his hand. He was determined to wipe that smirk off that annoying hunter's face with his fist, even if it was the last thing he'll do. A few months walked by since Garu's silent claim to Hasu as his territory. Garu's seemingly merciless hunts seemed to cease, for now, leaving a tense sense of peace for the heroes and some of the villains. The absence of body piles instilled hope for some of the newer heroes, like MT Lady, alleviating her worries of joining the staggering list of victims. One of whom was now engaged in training his own successor for the day when he passed on his quirk, one that spanned several generations. From the sands of Dagoba to the sidewalk, Midoriya panted as the weight of the tire threatened to collapse his fortitude and buckle his knees before the golden vesper warming his sweating hide. Overwatching his chosen successor struggle under the ocean breeze, Toshinori wandered his thoughts on the future. The subject mostly revolved around the one person responsible for sending so many peacekeepers out of commission. A contradictory figure, he was, of whose alignment remained unclear. He looked down on his casted right arm as it pulsed tenderly from memory. Picturing the future, the stray vision of the hero hunter, or the hunter amongst villains as many would call him for short, facing Midoriya in combat arrived first in his thoughts. The number one hero grimaced at the sight of his successor encountering him. As of now, he wasn't ready. Even worse, Yagi cannot tell when he will be prepared to face the hunter. The fear of him hunting his successor, if allowed the chance, still rung within his soul, haunting his hope and the safety of Midoriya. However, despite this fear, he was assured he wouldn't do so. Yagi witnessed the honor inside him. Yet, the impact he left behind still resonated with the doubts within. The man possessed an unnatural talent for instilling fear inside even the bravest hearts at first contact. A fear that he wished to not share with the rest of the world, the fear that the hero society's collapse would come to fruition, an outcome now entirely at his mercy. All Might grimaced at the empty air. He still didn't approve the decision to retaliate against Garu, yet his protest fell on deaf ears. Various hero agencies, one of which belonged to his former sidekick, banded together in hopes of defeating one of the greatest menaces that terrorized Japan, all for one included. "You're making a mistake," he muttered his word, as aimed mostly at his former sidekick despite his not being here. While he agreed Garu's seemingly indiscriminate rampage must end, he did not condone the method of using numbers against him. Something about him didn't agree with Yagi's intuition. He cannot tell what it was, but he feared he wouldn't find out until it's too late. There was a dark presence hiding within him. Something unsettling, dangerous, its identity unknown. Nevertheless, he cannot stop them now, not unless he fully recovered from his previous bout. Still, a part of him wished their success, that they proved his worries unfounded with air victory. But no matter what he did, he cannot imagine them winning against Garu. He did not know why, but that was the impression Garu imprinted. If Garu could be compared with a symbol, the closest avatar of a particular aspect of humanity, one came to his mind. However, the grunting of Midoriya interrupted him of his thoughts as the young all-might fan panted, out of breath on his knees but conscious. His eyes were shaking from stress, the exhaustion catching up with him and threatening to bring him down. "Ha, I'm done." Midoriya finished his quota, yet struggling even to stand. "Ha ha ha, good job." Toshinori visually took in Izuku's tired form. He made a promise to himself and the wielders before him. He will uplift Izuku to become one of the greatest heroes after him, no matter the dangers or obstacles in his way for the future of all. Under the cloaking night, where many working souls return home from their daily duties, the darkness festered in the absence of light, flourishing like a field of weeds in fertile soil. Out in the rural streets of Dagoba, where not many reside and out of public eye, a hooded man slowly walked down the stairs under the sign of a bar and entered through the inconspicuous door. On the other side, amber light dimmed the mahogany wooden planks constituting the floor and wall, fading into shadow at the outer edges of the bar. Behind the long wooden bar counter and the serried stools holding red cushions, Kurogiri nodded to Tomura while his hands rubbed the white cloth within the glass cup. Nodding back to the man of black mist, Tomura sauntered hunched forward to one of the stools, sitting on the red cushion with his arms rested on the counter. "Has your day been well, Tomura Shigaraki?" Tomura scoffed as he rapped his fingers on the flat surface. "Nothing much. Checking out the heroes and signs of the hero hunter. Can't seem to get a fix on him, though, other than that he might be in Hosu." Kurogiri nodded as he stopped cleaning the glass. "How's Sensei? Anything wrong with him after the experiment?" he asked, referring to the things Kurogiri managed to scrounge in his trigger experiments. "While I share your concern for his health, it is best if you ask Sensei directly. He wants to see you on a certain matter." "Huh? Which one?" Tomura blinked under his hood. There was much to do in his preparations for his debut, so he did not know what more his sensei had in store for him. Without responding, Kurogiri grabbed a remote from the under the counter, turning on the monitor embedded high on the wall. The screen flicked to life, revealing dark waves of sound pulsing in tune with Sensei's voice as the symbol of evil spoke. "Tomura, I take it you're doing well? How is your skin around your neck? Scratching it too much would ruin it, ha ha ha." The man responsible for All Might's current condition spoke to Shigaraki with a tone that could be considered fatherly, a twisted one raising a demented killer as his own child. "Sensei, how do you feel right now?" In the bar hidden within Kamino, Tomura asked his sensei shown on screen from his seat. The apprentice of All for One could see his MSTR's complexion healing, the scars fading gradually at an almost imperceptible pace from the rims. "Tomura, your concern warms my healing heart. Ha ha ha. The doctor worked wonders on me. I can feel the despicable scars haunting my years uplifting. Why, I've almost forgotten the feeling of fresh relief after so many years. It's a magnificent feeling." The symbol of evil heartily chuckled, his grin possessing more verisimilitude than before. Tomura still couldn't believe a thing like that could exist when Kurogiri experimented the first time. Whatever that was, it was something they can use, and what they needed to restore All for One's health. "Kurogiri said you got something for me." He tersely switched topics, both glad and concerned for his sensei, the first that death will no longer haunt his sensei, while the latter still apprehensive using that without knowing its species and capabilities was wise. "There is a loose end the Union requested you to handle on their behalf. His usefulness has expired." The mention of any possible breach tugged his strings, the kind that strums disdain. What kind of loose end are we talking here? Anything that threatened his goals must be erased, disappear. A certain asset is being compromised in his line of work and threatens to expose our dealings. We no longer need such a critical liability anymore, and just when we had our replacement ready. Would you do the honors in erasing this parasite from our ranks? Tomura's dry, chewed lips slowly curled into a grin. The imagined rush-like elation of feeling someone's life fading in his palm was gushing like BLD from a wound. "That would be my pleasure." Far within the untamed outskirts of Hosu, shrouded in the sea of bowls and green foliage bathing under the afternoon sun, The silver-haired fledgling assailed the smiling target of his ire while his lungs burned past its limits. A feeling excruciatingly shared with his arms and legs, his abdomen, and his head screaming at him to allow a respite from the pain, a luxury he cannot permit as he continued assailing the Crimson Hunter. "Try harder, Shrimp." "Don't call me that," Shrimp wheezed with his BLD-shot eyes fired at the evil one. His efforts doubled from the provocation. For weeks, he suffered under his hands. A part of him regretted taking his challenge, but his pride and rage superseded any longing to back down. Without anything to lose in life, he will tread the road to hell and get out one way or another. Also, he can beat up the man with a penchant for violence and erecting monuments of his victories with the bodies of his victims. Recounting his beginnings, Gin cannot believe that he even lived through the hellish ordeals Garu held in store for him. Climbing the hellish peaks thrice per day, performing series of stances of martial art he had never heard of while encumbered with aching muscle and bones, and spar with the hero hunter along with other exercises reinforcing his fighting sense and reflexes. Even after all that, the boy had to walk back home tired and racked by gnawing agony. Leaping up, he pounced, swiping for Garu's neck like a tiger trying to tear the throat of its prey. But Garu was nothing like prey, but a more dangerous predator toying with its food. One hand relaxed behind, Garu casually stepped back with synchronized timing, the skin of his neck narrowly escaping the nail of Gin's claws so relaxed that it was mocking to the boy's efforts, an act the boy will not tolerate as he drew every last drop of his strength with clenching teeth and furious fervor and charged forward. In the duration, Garu backed away in response at a close, fixed distance, like a magnet forever moving out of Gin's repulsing reach. "Yes, good. Fight against your weakness and come at me." Garu grinned as he continued evading the boy's belligerent leaps and lunges without a drop of consideration for defense. He smiled while Gin snarled, approving the boy's progress and tenacity. Despite climbing the mountain thrice and performing various martial sets in the prior morning, the boy fought on with promising potential despite the burning pain and heavy fatigue threatening to drag him into inevitable collapse. He favored the boy's tenacity and fighting spirit, along with his improving mentality and mood. A significant change compared from then and now. Gin developed his preferred fighting style during the weeks, a much more aggressive reflection of the old fart's martial arts. It was like the prelude of a roaring flood, the unsettling glimpse at the beginning stages of a rampaging tidal wave slowly growing to a tsunami. Its aggressiveness was more primal compared to his own, the boy's aggressive stances designed to obliterate the enemy, to forbid the enemy any quarter. His choice of style was not what Garu expected, however. Initially, he conjectured a more passive choice, but given the boy's current lack of timidity, Garu speculated that the boy locked away much of his anger within the depths of his heart. When he recalled Gin's harsh past, he was impressed by how well the kid hid his inner turmoil from him. Backed into a tree, his behind centimeters from the bark, he leaped over the boy's wide right hook. He did not miss how the boy tore a big chunk of bark from the poor tree, a feat he failed to accomplish before when they first met. Seeing the splintered bowls shattered by the hands of the quirkless boy, Garu finally had proof evidence that the power of quirks held the potential of humans back. Turning around with bellicose frustration contorting his face, Gin was about to pursue his frisking MSTR until the hunter raised one palm up. "Let's call it a day for now," he suggested, his declaration flushing all of Gin's belligerence down the drain as he cooled. In his releasing his aggression, Gin immediately collapsed to his hands and knees as if all the accumulated fatigue and exhaustion stole away his balance and breath. Sweat trickles off his chin and cheeks in rivulets, droplets of perspiration dripping into the soil and grass. "How do you feel, Shrimp?" Garu asked as the boy struggled to raise his right hand, only to flash Garu a middle finger. "Ah-ha-ha-ha-ha," Garu laughed in response to his student's gall. "I hate you so much," Gin expresses all of his spite for the martial artist. "What happened to I will smack you so strong, you'll embrace the moon before? I will kick you off the mountain." The polite, timid boy was nowhere at this moment, replaced by an angry, adorable toddler trying to be as intimidating as the hero hunter himself. "Ah-ha-ha-ha-ha," Garu can't help but laugh at the kid's sense of humor, finding it very refreshing in this world of worthless heroes and villains. "Stop laughing, I will ram my fist through your esophagus and tear out your stomach." Raising his neck, Gin pouted while his body trembled with irritated rage. Ah ha 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 ha. Alright, let's go home. Or are your legs too weak to walk the distance? Garou taunted, earning another tick mark from the boy. Grah! Gin roared to his feet, his refusal to allow Garou the high ground to nitpick him. He will make Garou eat his words, then make him choke on it via strangulation. That's the spirit. He flashed the boy a thumbs up, only to receive another middle finger from him in return. Garou almost laughed once again. He started to like this version of Shrimp instead of the shy boy that always sulked in the playground. Tired, Gin looked at the long road, his legs begging him for rest upon remembering the distance he must trek once more. His frustration crumbled to silent wails as his legs cried with him, its pain as their voice pulsing through his tendons. I don't want to walk back, Gin whined, expending all his rage. He did it every day for weeks, be it on school days or off days. It's good for your legs, Garou retorted. The kid only pouted at Garou's cruel sense of humor. He had not the energy or words to even talk back in his current state, resorting to giving the Garou his angry eyes. Garou only laughed as they walked down the road back between the columns of bark and leaves, patting the kid's head as they head back to their abode. The boy still pouted even in their escapade back to civilization, swearing to himself that he'll get Garou the next time. Returning home on foot while the sun entered its incipient twilight, Garou watched the news while the kid prepared dinner, preparing some gyoza and dumplings along with some rice. Through the news, the screen presenting a conversation between host and guest, two of whose names never imprinted themselves within Garou's memories, he summarized the 3 months after he settled in the kid's home. The fires of unrest plaguing Japan smoldered throughout the months slowly, cooled by the winds of peace. The hero hunter cases slowly dwindled into scarcity, each one tamer than the last, a change that did not escape the public's notice, at least when concerning the heroes. The number of villain piles started to frequent more and more, while the number of heroes slowly decreased, and compared to the villains, the heroes felled by his hand downgraded too from gore-encrusted piles to simple defeats, their bodies harmed no further than mere, swift knockouts. Not even a single drop of BLD was spilled. As for the villains, they drew the short end of the stick. Garou's fulcrum of violence tipped more towards the villain's side than that of the heroes, their fates equal to or worse than the first victims at his debut. The villains Garou indirectly inflamed to action dwindled in number, each joining their fellows behind iron bars one by one once almost all the heroes Garou personally sent to the hospital recovered, both physically and mentally, although they did not return completely intact. The scars of Garou, now infamously known as the hunter amongst villains in the hero community, were apparent in every hero that left their hospital beds. While their bodies recovered, their pride and confidence did not. Whatever conviction they had in their standing as heroes were torn asunder by his hands, and then roughly patched together in stitches unhealed. In summary, their morale was at an all-time low, slowly spreading throughout the hero community. Fear of encountering the hero hunter was present in the newest heroes, and the untouched, while touching the hearts of many veterans, none of them wished to join the hero hunter's growing body count. Despite the peaceful settling, his impact never left the hearts of the many civilians, heroes, and some villains, and little did they know, and it did not please the man himself as he read the newspaper as he sat on a public bench in Dagoba on a Monday under the afternoon sun. Garou murmured as the commercial aired. Ignoring the irksome ads involving the merchandise of a certain rookie female giant with horns, which was next to impossible given that her name was almost everywhere, be it television or billboard ads, he continued on to the next page only to grimace further. Really? No matter how many times he sees it, he just could not understand the logic behind the populace's excessive praise and adoration for the heroes here. The amount was very sickening, even worse for a bunch of worthless sellouts. It was like a world full of masks, all servants of justice treated with unflinching, unconditional fanfare, only these were far worse than that overrated A-class hero, the vermin equivalent in a sense infesting society. The ads finally ceased as the next topic of conversation arrived, this one of him in general. At long last, the agencies finally commissioned a manhunt against the hero hunter in response to his various hunts, most likely in retaliation for the heroes he brutalized to an unnecessary extreme. As for the identities of the heroes participating in the manhunt, the agencies withheld their names but promised to divulge them after their success. Ho? He was surprised to see a reaction force against him, though he questioned their very delayed response. However, the next scene later delves into said reason. Normally, such a manhunt should be immediate in response to the severity of the hero hunter's hunts, but according to recent questioning, their time was occupied suppressing the chaos that ensued following the hero hunter, quelling the inspired villains that rose to action in the absence of the victimized heroes. Most of the heroes were occupied dealing with the surge of villain incidents harassing the streets, some of which he contributed by adding them in body piles, mostly because they pissed him off with their gall to involve the innocent in their violence. Some of them dragged the hero hunter himself into their rampage, 7 more times in his wandering search for viable game. On to the next topic. The ongoing case of Fui Serif seems to be concluding into a CLMX, as the attorney of the various victims allegedly assaulted by him, Tsukihana Shinjitsu, progresses forward with newfound evidence about multiple counts of corruption and connections to various criminal organizations in Japan. The silver-haired woman that he saw on TV, a young lady of early 20s bedecked in an argent-white suit with a gray tie spilling from her neck and a somewhat short blouse hugging a third of her thighs, while the rest her legs showed naked skin minus the medium-high heels. Her hair bundled into a ponytail behind her back. Her eyes were like cerulean gems sparkling in the artificial lights, and her face almost seemed sculpted given her maiden-like visage. The woman that the boy called his auntie appeared behind the screen. Someone with not the time and freedom to care for the kid in her line of duty. Apparently, due to some legal spiel, the woman was sequestered into her work office during certain large-scale cases concerning the societal and political, especially when charging one of the hero industry's managers for fraud, tax fraud, molesting, abusing quirk usage, and, frankly, Garu was surprised someone like him was still allowed to stay in office for so long. According to the boy, Tsukihana cannot leave the case without consequences lest she suffered a significant fine and great repercussion to her judicial career. It would explain why he never met the woman throughout the few months. Now that Garu thought about it, although he doubted that her career choice was ideal when stacked with parental duties. Then again, the woman probably didn't have the luxury. Politics in the making, Garu grimaced. He considered hunting the man, but the boy pleaded not to go. Not only would it complicate Garu's staying here, but also jeopardize any viable excuse to let him stay. The hunter was surprised by the boy's sound logic. Now that he thought about it, Garu did hear that the kid went to a private school of sorts. Does that mean the kid was smart? A genius? He would ask later on when he had the chance. "Dinner's ready," Gin shouted. Coming, he closed the TV before it continued any further and rose from his comfy couch. He decided to hunt tomorrow Monday after his morning workout. In the profession of evil, the abduction of a victim required 3 things: timing, workforce, and information. One cannot throw multiple kidnapping requests in terse successions without attracting unwanted attention. Depending on the competence of the hired hands, the probability of success will either lean towards the side of success or that of failure. And finally, information was paramount, preceding the first 2. Knowledge of the target, his lifestyle, behavior, connections, etc., is the vital crux to any plan to mitigate all threats of compromise that could spiral all efforts to waste. For example, Allmight decides to pass by and catch onto the crime before completion. Once one fulfilled all thrice criteria, success was inevitable in most cases. Villains carefully selected with moderate history for said trade prowled around the near-vacant building. Many riches at stake for their success, affluence to rise above and prosper. None of them shared a distinctive uniform, as all that applied were competitors in the same trade. One of them stood tall, prominent, and bulking, another cut from the fabric of power types, as his uniform barely managed to contain his build. His skin was black, his face armored with chitinous brown, eyes pulled so deep in his sockets that none can see even the whites of his sclere, while his height stood 2 times taller than that of the average non-mutant type humans. Another one of them was visually similar to a lamia, half her lower torso that of a serpent while the upper being humanoid. Her quirk allows her serpentine half to adhere to any surface and traverse it, vertically or horizontally without the hindrance of gravity. She was currently scaling the walls of their target's home, slithering heavenwards with the silent grace of a spider as sticky slime trailed behind her path. The others were just as unique in their threatening diversity, a squad of more than 10. First, a 2-person team will enter the front while the second team infiltrated around. Then a third team will search for the building's circuit breaker in the basement to cut off the building's power supply. One of the guys with them could jam electromagnetic waves, so any calls to the police or cries of help will fall on deaf ears, effectively cutting him off from the rest of the world. Balnu, one of the only 2 visually pure humans in this group, acting as the team's unspoken coordinator, possessing the ability to communicate and relay telepathic messages with those he touched. He stood on standby in the interim as his sharp eyes lazily glazed over the building and his oral orifice yawning out his evident boredom. An early bird, he wordlessly grumbled in protest at the late hour, wishing that the client would have staged the abduction somewhat earlier than his late in the morning. His stray hand reached behind and dug into his pants, scratching the scab blistering his butt meat without care, unbothered that the one beside him was watching with disgust scrunching his features. Really? She looked away, clicking her tongue in disgust, refusing to allow her reptilian eyes further suffering. Her name was Cecilia, a hardened woman with slit pupils, her quirk bestowing perception of heat behind solids. Her skill sets assigned her as the group's monitor, her eyes so to speak. However, her quirk was not without limits. If used, her range of sight shrinks in a critical state of tunnel vision, and she cannot see 5 feet past the first layer. Her job was to track the target's point of departure should he somehow slip past the trained vanguard. The client poured a lot of resources this time to ensure absolute success this time. I don't like you, either. Another yawn pried his mouth open wide as tears trickled under his eyes while the others updated him on their progress. Team A managed to secure the rooftop entrance while Team B entered the generator room in the basement. Do you really have to make this collaboration even more displeasing? She hissed back. Hey, I'm just here for the money. Really, I don't care about any of you, so say what you want about me after we're done. The employer offered 3 times the previous bounty for their success, his generosity evidently derived from desperation since his case was entering its crescendo. However, his hired hands cared not for his fate, and whether he escaped the hammer of justice or dragged into the pits of Tartarus, only his money concerned their mutual interests. I hope you end up in a body pile. His apathy tugged a warning hiss from the woman, a trending allusion to the fate of various villains and heroes unfortunate enough to fall before the hunter's eyes. Ha, you wish? No way in hell he'll greet me at this hour. Balnu laughed, finding the idea ridiculous. Ever since Garu's first hunt, none of his victims fell past the twilight hours. To him, all human beings cannot escape their habits, and to him, the hero hunter was no exception to this rule. I hope he rips your arms off. Let's see how you'll live without scratching that filthy rear of yours. Balnu chuckled at her quip. Yeah, keep on dreaming, lady. Balnu shot a sideways wink behind at the woman. The sight of her gnashing her teeth and tense her fingers as if threatening to rip him apart only served to widen his smile further. Balnu, we're ready to bust in the kid's room. Stand by, the Lamia woman informed from the rooftops. The communicator grinned. Finally, it was time to finish the job and return home. About time. Team B, cut the power already. It's time to bag this kid and cash in. The others hung up as they proceeded to their objectives. Now, without anything to do, Balnu sighed as the boredom settled in like dust in the empty room. His thoughts wandered from his next goals or life plans, wondering if he should retire with this job's cash. However, in his stray thinking, the fate of the previous workers crossed his mind. He grimaced at the remembrance of their destinies, mutilated like helpless meat tossed into the grinder. According to the only eyewitness, some guy fell from the sky and butchered them with his bare hands, though the details of his prevailing features did not reach public ears. Balnu wondered what exactly did the previous team encounter to end up like meat displayed behind the glass pane in a butcher's shop. He doubted that an actual angel descended from the sky to punish the wicked. Don't think I'll encounter him this time. He shrugged. Whoever the person responsible, he sure wished he never met the guy. Miracles never happened twice as far as he was concerned. All right, girl, we're almost done here. Prepare to pack up and... cut off mid-speech. A sudden scream from one of the men inside rattled his composure. "Oi, what happened?" Before he could demand a response, Cecilia shouted behind him. "Something's coming this way." Throwing his head around, he saw the woman pointing up. Following her line of sight, he barely discerned it, but he somehow made out a shadowy silhouette looming above, falling. Wait, it was falling above him being the guy under its landing point. "Echivchi," he spouted incoherent babbling as he screamed, while jumping aside the moment the thing fell on the floor with a splat. Something just fell from the literal night sky, and its landing sounded wet. Looking down, right when the clouds moved to unveil the full moon, the body of the Lamia revealed herself to the others, this time with her whole body caked in her lifeblood under the pale lunar light. Eyes locked onto the body, the brutality of her condition froze Balnu and Cecilia in place, the level of violence frightfully reminiscent of the hunter amongst villains. They shunned the thought, denying the possibility for the first few seconds. The two desperately attempted to reject that they lied within the hunter's sights at this very moment. Creaking his trembling head to his coworker, he silently whispered, "You don't think." Cecilia, her face as stiffened as his, tentatively shook her head in absolute denial without a word. Silence took hold as the man tried to contact the others, but heard more screams as well, followed by the sound of windows shattering when 3 figures flew out, bodies tumbling with the sound of snapping bone and squelching moist meat, as well as crimson smears trailed in their descent. The sight of their coworkers, even the muscled brute of the scene, lied down, 2 face down and 1 face up. The face of their powerhouse revealed broken teeth, blood trickling out his lips, and the bones of his face half caved in. "Oh God," Cecilia whispered as the nightmare ignited, the terror taking hold like flames in the oil field. No. That shouldn't be possible. He never hunts past morning," he shouted, desperately denying the reality before him as his eyes grew manic, darting without aim or focus as his pupils trembled in anxiety while cold drops of sweat spilled from his pores. Their job was meant to be simple. Take the kid, get paid, return home a rich man. Not to become part of a live horror show as he considered palter his obligations and run. Casting a glance at Cecilia, he could tell from her wide, staring eyes that she shared the same idea. When more cries howled from the building, the duo did not waste time turning tail and fled the scene. They do not want to be here. They do not want to join the bodies under Garu's feet. Footfalls and chunky heels slammed the sidewalk as they exerted their legs to their very limits, faces painted with tangible fear, tears streaming down their eyes and some snot dripping their noses as they sprinted in their shutting the world from their senses sustained via their pure sense of self-preservation. They ran and ran, the screens behind them fading in the widening distance, sprinting past the red light and the rare cars at their current hour. They turned around one corner, then another, continuing to zigzag around the concrete jungle until they rolled right into a shadowed alley. Protected by the darkness, the two kept running without aim past trash cans and smearing filth until they encountered the alley's wall, a dead end. With nowhere to run, Cecilia quickly threw back a glance, seeing no demon behind their tail. She panted and noticed her expended breath, "think we've lost him." She sighed, releasing all tension from her muscles as she doubled over the moment the exhaustion caught up. Gandering her cohort, she paused when she saw the man bleeding, half of his teeth missing from his jaw with his head held in the hands of another shadowed figure, his right eye gleaming gold within the darkness. Not a single word gestated in her throat, no words coming to mind except the wondering of how the hero hunter preyed on her group's acting leader under her nose. It was a horror flick made real, Cecilia the victim while Garou was the monster. Before she could collapse and beg for mercy, darkness submerged her like a flash of black light, her only memory being crunching pain rattling her skull followed by the sound of crunching stone behind her. Silence returned as the hunter proceeded to pick up their bodies by the legs, one in each hand, and continued to drag them away. The sound of LTHR and polyester slid abrasively with the asphalt. He was not in the mood for another pile, as his sleep was interrupted so early in the morning. He would make an example of them in a different approach. Hidden under the mantling night behind the safe walls of his silent office, the only source of illumination being the dim ceiling light, excitement rattled within throughout his bones and kept him awake, desperately awaiting the news of success to arrive. Unable to sleep due to the tension, FUI intermittently wrapped his fingers together with impatience, his eyes gazing past the window pane leading to the bird's-eye view of the city of Tokyo. This time blanketed by night with a sea of stars swimming through the sky with near immobile pace. He had plans for the child. One of them was breaking his will along with relieving his stress and vengeance for what his blasted WHR of an aunt put him through. He would pour oil over her life and set it aflame with despair unlike no other, and he will laugh above the ashes and revel in her suffering to some. His eyes wandered, shifting from building to building in his crepuscular room, but, barely from the dim light, he saw a fading reflection of sudden darkness opening a hole in the empty air behind him, of which spilled purple haze around the circular rims of the pitch-black void. He recognized that tier in reality anywhere, but why would All for One send his warper to his office? When the only plausible answer struck home, his eyes widened as wide as dinner plates as he quickly spun around his rotary chair half-full circle to greet Kurogiri as he emerged, of whom stood calmly in the center of the dim lighting. "Kurogiri, do not worry, for I am almost done on my side. Tell All for One that I am." Before he could finish, another dark hole opened up inches from his face, its diameter as large as an orange's, and a gnarled, wrinkled hand pale in color sprang from the infinite abyss and wrapped its twig-like fingers around his face, the middle finger just centimeters above his forehead. "Why, Shigaraki? I was almost done. If you gave me more time, I would have... Bring more trouble to Sensei after failing to cover your tracks. Don't feed your CRP to me, you disgusting pig." Tamura finished for him, reminding the pig of his current standing. The vortex widened as if stretching open, making room as the rest of Shigaraki's body spilled through until only his face emerged, masked by the preserved hand of his father. "Sensei has a message for you." Fui's brows quivered with fright, his teeth rattling as sweat poured profusely out his pores. "The League of Villains will no longer tolerate your disgusting presence and bumbling arrogance. Thank you for all the work you've done until now." Upon finishing, Tamura tapped the pig's forehead with his middle finger, entirely holding Fui in his hands. "No, please VERYYYY," he squealed, his voice high in pitch like that of an actual pig before he started to gurgle on his flesh when his body crumbled. His skin fell off, cracked and crumbling from the muscle before the rest followed and joined the epidermis. Tendons decomposed, skipping the rotting stage and heading straight towards decomposition. Every fiber of his skin, tissue, and bones all collapsed, sadistically and gradually, into a puddle of BLD mixed with almost every other parts of his body surrounding the base of Fui's former chair. Former lifeblood drenching the furniture head to toe. The only limb intact from the bodily decay was the stubby hand of the pig lying at the epicenter of the cushion. "Kurogiri, we have work to do. Help me clean up the pig's mess." Tamura ordered as he and Kurogiri proceeded to wipe every evidence of his involvement with the Union and what will soon become the League of Villains. The late afternoon sun of Tuesday painted the streets of Japan with illuminating gold unhindered by obscuring clouds and the skies above immaculate blue, delivering a flawless, lumin day to the citizens down below. Past school hours, Bakugou rid the silver bullet train leading from his district school to Hasu. Excited, but bored in the inactivity during the meanwhile, he perused the internet through his phone, watching the latest media feed presenting recorded footage of the hero hunter's latest victims from the night before. 10 victims found, scattered like litter discarded to rot, now in medical beds with their limbs cast and their bodies bandaged to the point where they were almost mistaken for mummies. Arms and legs twisted in extreme angles, the villains laid prone in bed, their rasping breaths almost audible from the camera feed through the breathing apparatus, their states far more pitiful compared to those from the previous hunts. While listening to the reporter's commentary through his earphones, Bakugou caught a familiar, irritating voice from beside him. "K. Kaken?" All muscles stiffened as irritation coursed through Bakugou's veins. An angry retort exploded from his mouth at the sight of the worthless, quirkless nobody that always followed him like an accursed shadow. "Deku? What are you here on this train for, huh?" Bakugou roared at the irksome vermin. Midoriya looked away, timidly attempting to form the right wording of his response, but was cut off by Bakugou again. "Don't tell me. You here to see it?" Bakugou accused, knowing Deku's mindset yet still angst by it. Well. The next few stops will enter Hasu. There's nothing of interest beyond that point. So unless you have a relative there, you're here to see his work, aren't you? Midoriya has no words to rebuke that. He cannot tell that All Might invited him to see it, of whom stood several passengers away from Midoriya while attempting to act as conspicuous as possible. He did not want to attract attention from others, especially Izuku's supposed childhood friend. Why, yeah, kind of. Izuku could only shirk away from Katsuki's looming glare, threatening to overshadow the remnants of his confidence. Go home, Deku. This doesn't concern you. Izuku pursed his lips with his eyes still averting Bakugou's gaze. He did not have the guts to refute how wrong the self-proclaimed future number one was, especially given the context of the hero hunter's newest trophy. I'm just curious, that's all. I mean, I've never seen something like it ever. Bakugou scrunched his brows, his left eye twitching. As much as he wanted to refute and demand Midoriya's leave, he cannot deny how unique this stunt was. Of course, Izuku would want to see it. Tusk, fine, stare all you want, but mark my words, when I defeat this so-called hero hunter, I will present his body in front of that. Bakugou arrogantly declared, his mind filled with delusional fantasies of his ensured fame and glory, standing atop of the hero hunter, the bloody demon, the hunter amongst villains, over Garu himself. His ears catching his declaration, the crippled skeleton could only imagine the youth joining the body pile, broken in spirit like his body before carried to the hospital in shame. As one who fought Garu, he knew that the man himself was beyond dangerous, someone who exists outside the borders of common sense. The first fight with Garu was more than enough indication of that. And worse, Toshinori felt as if he hadn't seen the worst of what Garu had to offer in the end. While submerged in his thoughts, the slowing of the train pulled Toshinori from his rumination, as the automatic announcer informed their current stop in Hasu through the speakers. Tusk, we'll talk later. He flashed a final glare at Yuku before stepping out the train, along with many others. Little did Izuku know, most of the passengers left at this stop, the other passengers also sharing Bakugou's longing to see the hero hunter's latest work, people flowing out like water flushed down the sink. Hesitant, Izuku slowly left the train, joining his fellow onlookers unawares, followed by All Might, the skeleton, as they mixed with the crowd like stray droplets merging with the polychromatic river. Switching their modes of transportation from the train to bus, the three traveled through the seemingly peaceful streets as they headed out towards a somewhat large gathering of what seemed to be similar curious minds after more than an hour. No monument of consecutive victories erected with the victims' bodies, no victims shamed for his amusement. At the scene of the hero hunter's most recent crime, a growing crowd, cordoned by police officers and vehicles, stood outside the barricades and stared at the kanji of incomplete crimson. The strokes were messy, the colors losing linear cohesion from repeated attempts as if the calligrapher was working with dwindling paint and a flawed brush. However, despite the blatant mess of attempts, the chaotic result only augmented the unsettling impact on the psyche twofold, even more so when the media divulged what he used as his brush. The hero hunter painted a canvas of misery with the villains as his crimson brush, completing a macabre portrait of his growing brutality. The level of unprecedented savagery not only rattled the morale of both heroes and villains, but also rendered all thoughts mute with speechlessness. A kanji in hellish red, faded, incomplete, amateur, but impactful, the trickling crimson seemed as if the word itself was crying in pain. The smell of acrid iron emitting from the paint reached the nostrils of both police and onlookers, forcing Bakugou and Izuku amongst them to scrunch their noses from displeasure. The odor reminded them of that one villain from the internet article, how half his face lost its skin, scraped off, dipped in the BLD of the other villains, only to suffer even more abrasions in repeated attempts. Both the news and the sites censored the image to protect the minds of children and parents from further unwanted terror. The kanji, the Japanese word for fear, adorned the wall, drawn with faces of humans, as the hair of his brush and BLD as his paint a macabre sight for all the heroes and villains that dare cross his path regardless of their intent. Despite the gory origins of the adumbrated graffiti, it attracted curious eyes like a landmark attracting tourists. After all, not even a single case where a villain vandalized private property with the BLD of villains occurred in the years after the masses established the hero system to stabilize society. Cameras flashed and clicked, cell phones raised as aleatory chatter exchanged between each lip. some marveling at the malice radiating from the graffiti as if it was a work of art, while others were absorbed by how its mien alone could instill such fear and still drew them in. As if the kanji was enchanted with the power to abduct the viewers, unhindered by its simplicity of design and lack of thought. Standing among the masses, Bakugou whistled at the sight, impressed. Got to say, it's savage. The living bomb praised the hero hunter's tastes. While gorily unsettling, it did have impact, and Bakugou respected it. Haha, beside him was the annoying gnat that kept following him around ever since they were little toddlers. And what the F are you still doing here, huh? Bakugou turned to the quirkless annoyance, eyes sharp and glaring at the timid wimp with moss for hair. See, can't I just watch? He slowly averted his eye contact until his pupils hit a dead end at the ocular corner. Toshinori Yagi, in his skeletal form with his right arm still casted, stood a few feet from Midoriya's left, his shadowed eyes locked onto the blooded kanji, and his face unreadable, submerged in his thoughts attempting to decipher the hero hunter's actions. Until now, it was always body piles erected one after another, sometimes one comprised of solely heroes, sometimes only villains, other times both, his savagery dwindling with each hero pile while worsening for the villains. While he did not condone the brutality for the villains, despite the drastic decrease of crime after each villainous hunt, he was somewhat hopeful that the hero hunter would retire from hunting heroes like game in the end at least, and spare the future generation from excess fear and terror. Although circumstance said otherwise in its visual loudest, already Toshinori could imagine the other heroes praying never to meet Garu in their lifetimes. Woo, it looks so cool. A child uttered far behind the vanguard of the crowd. Looking behind, Toshinori caught the sight of a silver-haired boy awing at the bloody graffiti. His short-sleeved shirt was white while his shorts were dull steel gray. Not only that, the boy was riding atop someone's shoulders, but he couldn't see the kid's parent behind the sea of faces. Who in the world would take a young kid out to see this? Toshinori doubted any respectable parent would allow someone of the kid's age to see something rated for teenagers and adults. In any case, he at least hoped that Garu wouldn't do the same to the heroes. He did not want to see Garu painting another call sign with the face of endeavor should the time come. Knowing Garu so far, Toshinori was sure that Garu would do that without a second thought. He sincerely hoped that day would never come. The tension settled just enough for the parents to consider allowing their children to enroll the hero schools of their dreams in Garu's respite. He even recalled Midoriya's hardships in convincing his mother to let him enroll in UA after all. Still, he could not understand Garu's motivations behind this horrific calligraphy. Was he trying to intimidate the villains into forced placation? Some villains do prefer to work alone, after all, so the prospect of villains despising other villains wasn't uncommon. But his unfair treatment of villains compared to that of heroes was peculiar in comparison. As he stood there in rumination, the two hopeful youths continued their chatter, though one of them was more screaming while the other whispering. Kaken, ever wondered why Garu would do this? Itsuku asked, hoping to shift the conversation to a different direction, one that did not involve Katsuki yelling his ears off. He's a villain. End of story, he spoke as if it was apparent. Midoriya almost dropped a sweat at his terse reply. I mean, will he do the same to other heroes as well? Of course he might. Bakugou had no idea where he was going with this. I'm not sure if our parents would let us go if he did. This time, Bakugou felt his words clogged in his throat. His temper cooled as if doused with cold water as he pondered on that reveal. Did your parents finally let you go? Izuku asked. Bakugou almost grimaced at the question. He had a very, very strong time convincing his stubborn, loud mouth of a mother to bestow her blessings. How about you? Izuku still remembered how his mother tearfully begged him not to go. Garu's hunts did more than a number on her fragile heart. She's still crying for me to stay. Both remained in shared silence as reality slowly sunk in. It was almost as if Garu was choking their futures, strangling them with infectious fear as his hands. Tesk, of course, you're going. Seriously, don't go. UA isn't a place for quirkless wannabes like you. Bakugou broke the tense ambience with words of his abrasive ego as his hammer. Midoriya sighed once again, his senses already numbed to Bakugou's constant jabs. Silence returned as they resumed staring at Garu's art project. Midoriya pondered what kind of quirk bestowed the hero hunter the power to defeat so many heroes and villains and include even All Might himself in his list of victims despite his weakened state. I wonder what kind of quirk he has, Izuku murmured. Bakugou did not miss his rhetorical question. Don't know. Some power-type quirk maybe. Bakugou shrugged, showing some interest. There is also the possibility of a speed quirk. A hybrid maybe like that of All Might's. Izuku speculated, leaving out the glaringly precise details on some of Garou's abilities. According to All Might, Garou possesses immense durability, profound strength, high speed, and extraordinary martial skills along with some unconfirmed powers, especially Garou's mysterious ability to control blades of wind, ones he used to lacerate coiling wounds around All Might's right arm. Whatever it was, Garou's quirk is on par with All Might's level. One like All Might's? Come on, the odds of that is almost zilch. Stop dreaming, Deku. Bakugou waved off his conjecture without a second thought. There was no way a villain with a quirk like All Might's could exist. If there were, they would have been on the news by now or so. Izuku took out his phone and turned on the camera function, aiming its lens at the morbid art. With the press of a button, the phone clicked as he snapped a photo to save for later study. Bakugou took out his phone and did the same, mostly as a souvenir, evidence of his being here before the police erase Garou's art project. I'm off. Better not see you anywhere near you, Deku, or I swear to show you a hell greater than anything the hero hunter can make. Bakugou then turned around, walking back through the sea of people and leaving Izuku alone with his idol. Bring me closer. Turning his head to the cheery voice, Izuku could see through the gaps of the crowd, a silver-haired boy riding someone's shoulder. Squinting his eyes, Izuku widened them from astonishment. Wow, what kind of quirk does he have? Izuku had never seen anyone as intimidating as him, hair stained with the color of BLD, the sclere of his right eye corrupted into wicked black, and a face that screamed danger. His hairstyle was sui generis as well, slicked back in a unique V-style. Not to mention the overwhelming impact his presence wrought upon first glance of which affected even the other bystanders around him. They were uncomfortable standing next to the scary man, though they didn't visibly show their displeasure. That man would probably be more intimidating than Bakugou could ever achieve if he put his mind to it. Izuku wondered if the man has a quirk that inspired fear to those around him. Wanting to capture a moment, Izuku aimed the camera of his phone, steadied his hand, and tapped the snap icon as his phone clicked, taking a reference to later write down in his notes after returning home. All right, think you can take a picture now? Although the man's demeanor and treatment of what seemed to be his little brother profoundly contradicted what his initial image would suggest, he seemed amiable despite his somewhat devilish countenance. The boy took out his phone from his pocket and aimed its camera at the hellish calligraphy. Almost, I got it. The boy smiled as Deku heard camera clicks from his phone. Come on, don't take too much of it. One is enough. The man carrying the boy retorted the boy's repetitive clicking. No, I want the perfect shot. The boy cheerfully denied as he continued taking more pictures. Really, you, the scary man sighed. Izuku almost smiled at the sight, glad that the man was not what his visage suggests. A textbook example of a life lesson to never solely judge a person by their cover. All right, that's enough. We're leaving. The man said as he pivoted around an abrupt half-circle before the boy could snap another pic. Wait, just one more. The boy whines, begging for more. Nope. The man playfully denied before walking away, leaving the scene as he melded back inside the crowd in his exiting. No, the boy wailed while his fingers tightened, pulling handfuls of the man's crimson hair in adorable protest. Izuku chuckled at the interaction between the two. They were like family in a sense. However, Toshinori almost gawped. Was that him? He rubbed his skeletal eyes after catching a glimpse of the boy's carrier through the narrow crevice between the wall of spectators. So shocked was he that he couldn't feel the warm feeling of BLD trickling down the corners of his lips. He desperately attempted to parse what his eyes witnessed to the best of his ability, but he just couldn't. He cannot process the sight of Garou being a family man and returning to the scene of the crime as if to show off his work to what seemed to be his brother. He shook his head. Must be his imagination, a trick of his eyes and ears. The possibility was as improbable as All for One turning to the light side. Plus, he could never imagine someone like Garou being that amiable to children of all people. "You should have let me take more pics, Gin continued complaining while pulling on Garou's crimson hair. "Stop it," Garou demanded, frowning at the boy's pulling of his hair. "No, I want to take more pics of my enemy's BLD painted on the wall," he continued, yanking his hair to Garou's chagrin. "You took enough, and get off my shoulders. I pay your meals, so instant hierarchy," he childishly rebuked, abusing the hero hunter's lack or absence of anything related to the financial. Like it or not, Garou was penniless here, and he preferred to pay for his meals more than stealing them to avoid unwanted trouble. The hero hunter sighed, grousing to himself. He could understand his longing to record proof of his attacker's suffering, most likely as a memento that his life-threatening days are completely over, assuming that Garou would stay at his place until then. "Also, record yourself painting next time. I want to see the rated R content." Gin yanked the pointy ends of Garou's crimson hair, earning more tick marks in the process. At this rate, he might go bald. All right. I will next time." That earned some leniency from the hair pulling as his apprentice employer smiled brightly. "Good. Now onwards, steed," Gin demanded, pointed his hand forward. Garou chuckled as he continued carrying the kid. So far, his mood was elevating the days gone by, though that did not exempt the complaints and threats Gin threw at him during training. His life seemed to be improving. The sight of Garou carrying the energetic boy, of whom they assumed as his little brother, on his shoulders earned some warm smiles from the nearby passerby, relieving them of their fear that the man was a potential villain. "So, when are you going to teach me the whirlwind iron-cutting fist?" Gin asked to pass the time. "Months." "What?" The boy started pulling Garou's hair in protest. Oh, I'm joking, Garou playfully assuaged as the boy stopped tearing his hair. "But I'm not sure if you're ready for that yet. You still haven't mastered the old fart's martial arts." "Your MSTR, right?" Gin heard some mentions of Garou's martial arts instructor before, but the hunter never divulged much on the subject, though he could conjecture some truths. "You know you never told me what he's like, right?" Gin asked, deciding to venture into dangerous grounds, hoping that Garou won't punish him with even more mountain climbs. Garou paused, his lips pursed and brows scrunched upon the mention of Bang. If there was a thought that crossed his mind since his arrival in this strange land, one came to mind. "He is one of the strongest old men I know and can kick all Might's butt with one hand behind his back." Garou exaggeratingly summarized the old man with a hint of respect. Usually, he would reserve solely animosity for Bang, but after staying here for months, he started to appreciate his former MSTR more. Who knew baptizing in the BLD of truly worthless heroes would prove so enlightening? "Oh." Gin awed in wonder, eyes sparkling as his vivid imagination run wild. "Is he like you? How strong is he?" The boy started bouncing on his shoulders with impatience. Garou stopped as the question incited him into deep rumination. How strong was the old fart? Garou, however, has absolutely no idea. He never got the old man to go all out on him to this point, but he at least grasped a general picture based on his personal, up-close experience. He can take on all the heroes in this Japan without taking a scratch. Heck, probably all the villains too if he wants. He paused in a sojourn upon remembering the country he found himself in before resuming his pace. It was strange, trying to recall the name of a nation. Only one country existed in his homeland as far as he knew, with merely 26 cities to boot. Unknown to him, the boy's eyes sparkled with wonder behind his head, while visions of a genuine martial arts grandmaster, wizened by age and tempered by experience, swam through his imagination. "Really?" Gin asked to make sure. "Well, unless they have a quirk that can take advantage of an old man's back pain, he probably could beat them all in a fair fight," Garou jokes. He would laugh if someone with that quirk that can topple the old monster actually existed. A cathartic, very entertaining thought he entertained. "Oh, will I meet him one day?" Gin asked, wanting to meet the guy. Garou pursed his lips. "Most likely no." "Eh? Why?" The boy wanted to see a real-life version of the stereotypical kung fu grandmaster, especially one so old and presumably wise. "I don't think anyone can return to where I'm from." Garu had no idea how he got here, but he had a hunch that a person with a quirk brought him here. Albeit, whether on purpose or not he did not know, but he waged his odds on accidental. So far, he encountered no sign of his summoner months after his unwanted arrival. Gin remained silent upon remembering Garu's home. The one with the monsters? Gin still couldn't believe the stories behind Garu's home. Natural disasters plagued his land like occasional rain. Abominations roamed the cities preying on the weak, and other humans with might comparable with his senseis. He could barely imagine any living being that could literally touch the clouds with his sheer height alone. How one could reach that size without suffering the backlash of overheating was beyond Gin's guess. It was impossible for anything to achieve that size, even with a quirk. Yet he was riding on a guy that hunted heroes for fun without a quirk. Sometimes Gin wondered if Garou was a quirk that had taken human form, but he shrugged the thought away upon feeling himself progressing further past the normal human limit. Yeah, the one with the monsters. I doubt any one of you guys can even survive there for a week. Hell, even All Might will end up as someone's excrement if he's unlucky enough. The boy imagined those with mutant quirks eating the non-mutated daily if Garu's description were sound. But, you think we can grow strong like you? Gin asked with hope. Yeah, you're living proof of that. You have actual potential compared with the losers I've hunted. The boy smiled from his praise, his heart aflutter with hope for his future, as their home visited their sight in the distance. They have returned home. As odd as Garu would say, he started to like this place, a far better environment compared to the old shack he used to hide out in the middle of nowhere. Now that I think about it, shouldn't I don a costume from now on? Which brought the question, should Garu conceal his identity somewhat to protect his home? He did start to like the kid, and his hunts drew a lot of attention, albeit it also drew another excellent question. Why didn't the heroes hunt him down so far? He stood out there in the open mingling with the civilians like he was one of them, out in the open without any disguise whatsoever. But that still did not invite the others to hunt him down. A question for another day. He didn't even spot a single police officer or sneaky hero around his home in his patrols around the kid's house. Say, how capable is the police here compared with the heroes? Why do you ask? Gin tilted his head. Just wondering. Well, they SCK. Gin summarized his views in 2 simple words. They are nothing more than the cleanup crew at this point. The heroes you downed so far are the only ones keeping the peace against the villains with quirks, Suo. Now Garu understood. They were just as inept, probably even more so. Riding behind the vanguard all this time had dulled their hunting instincts and fangs, Garu summarized. That explains why no one bothered finding me here. Albeit, Garu would probably search for a mask or something to protect his sanctuary. He likes this domicile. Entering through the glass slide doors, walking to the elevator at the far end of the lobby across the wooden planks of beige while still carrying the boy on his shoulders, they rose to the very top floor, one reserved for the owner and the VIPs. Garu sometimes wondered how rich the boy's aunt was to purchase the building and yet still maintained its pristine condition despite not having any tenants. Why bother owning the thing if no tenants arrive? I should have asked earlier, but remind me why this building has no tenants so far, Garu asked, wondering about the near-vacant state of the building. Auntie got the rights from suing that one guy. Forgot his name though, but the guy was a major drag dealer with the deeds to this place. That explained the reason no one would rent this place. The woman probably had more than enough money to maintain the building or had connections to nullify the costs. Enlightened, Garu exited the elevator with his passenger in tow. The familiar fleur-de-lis patterning the walls, lit by dim ceiling lights encased in opaque, faceted and circular glass, instilled a sense of warmth in Garu like he had found a place he can indeed call home. Walking past the rows of empty doors at his left and right, he stopped at the most prominent of it all, the one linearly facing the elevator at the far opposite end like two engaging in an eternal stare-down. Unhooking the key chain to the strap of his pants, he unlocked the mahogany door embossed with the white lotus engraved in the absolute center and creaked the door open. Gin, care to explain what happened while I was away? However, an irrefragable debacle hid behind the door, taking in the form of a very, very angry ant tapping her heel on the carpet. Garu blinked in surprise upon seeing her. Gin paled as if the devil appeared before him, gawping at the sight of his auntie. Ooh. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author I4MD347H on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.